district, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
What is up, Fantasyland? Welcome back to the GOAT District. For those that are joining us again, and those that are new, we appreciate you guys jumping on. Smash the subscribe, smash that like, guys. We've got another monster show tonight. Dan is away, Mr. Overhyped Sleeper with the family on a little trip. We'll update you guys on that later on. Andrew's cooped up in a La Quinta somewhere across the US of A, I'm sure. Theo, tonight it's you and I. He's at the OG Fantasy. I'm at JD GOAT District. Theo, we have another monster one tonight. A bit of KC New England news that we'll touch on later on in tonight's show, but we're pretty pumped about tonight's guest returning. Why don't you walk him in, my friend?
Yeah, so we're really excited to have Jared Smola of Draft Sharks back on the GOAT District. Jared, this is his third time in the district. We had him on as a solo guest, and that show was awesome. And then we had a couple of Draft Sharks guys where we did like a big GOAT District Draft Sharks combo show, which was awesome as well. Jared's putting out tremendous content, both in podcast form and in written form. If you're not a Draft Sharks subscriber and you enjoyed tonight's show with Jared, you should absolutely subscribe. I'm a subscriber to Draft Sharks. I love their content. I think that all their guys are sharp. Their guys have skin in the game. They have a tremendous number of tools that can help you as a drafter. And it's just good to see, other people's opinion that I respect in the industry. So Jared, welcome back to the GOAT District. We're super stoked to have you. How you doing tonight?
Doing good. Glad to be back. Best pod intro in the game. It always, gets me fired up when I get to watch that and then come on with you boys.
It's the best song literally in fantasy football podcasting. JD
sure.
crushed it on that one. Yep.
Shout out to the FF Man Bun, Mr. Gabe, friend of the pod. We appreciate his work. And yeah, man, happy to have you back. Jared, you're like Theo mentioned before we came on, you guys are crushing it over there at Draft Sharks. We're pumped to have you on tonight. Talk some redraft, but just like every other convo we have on this show, whether we're talking redraft, best ball, or dynasty, I think it applies across the board when you're drafting this time of year. So we're looking forward to picking your brain, having a bit of banter on what's going on, how you're approaching these drafts. Theo, why don't you kick it off, man?
Yeah, so we'll dive right into it. You follow ADP closely. You also do rankings. What's your initial reaction to ADP this year? How do you view the first round, like in terms of tiers? Do you think it's appropriately priced?
I mean, what's driving my early draft strategy, and I would say this is like the first 3 or 4 rounds, is to me, I love the running backs available in like rounds 2 and 3. And there's even a guy in round 4, Cam Akers. I'm having trouble passing up on him in round 4. So the running backs available in those, second, third rounds, that's kind of pushing me towards ideally one of those elite wide receivers in the first round. If I can get Cooper Kupp or Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase, and then, moving towards the back half of the first round, a Steph Diggs, a Devante Adams. Like I like locking up one of those guys in the first and then coming back and grabbing, 2 of, Joe Mixon. Saquon Barkley is, I think, a massive, massive value in drafts right now. You have Alvin Kamara, Leonard Fournette, Aaron Jones, Javonte Williams is like a second or third rounder at this point. So I feel good if I can get a couple of those backs who I think have the potential to get 300 touches and, put up top 10 fantasy numbers, if I can pair a couple of those guys with one of those truly elite wide receivers, that's kind of how I like starting drafts right now.
Yeah, I love that call. I think that I've actually been doing the same, where it's almost like a modified hero RB build. We could call it the sidekick build. It's like more Robin than Batman. But you get these guys in the third round that I think that wide receivers kind of been correctly pushed up at certain portions, where you get a guy like a James Conner. I think Fournette's interesting. I love your Saquon call, but I think he's headed up to the second, maybe kind of loses a little bit of his value, but you're starting to see Etienne climb up in there. It's a very interesting way to approach this year, and I think there could be some monster teams built that way. So I'm glad to see you're on that. Go ahead, JD.
Where does that tier end for you, Jared? Like if you're looking at that second and third round, I know you mentioned a lot of guys there. Like does Demont make it in there for you? Does Dobbins make it in there for you? Does it stop at Breece Hall? No.
It kind of stops at Cam Akers for me right now. I'm okay with Breece Hall. I don't love David Montgomery. I don't love J.K. Dobbins. Dobbins especially, I'm off of at cost right now. The ACL's the first issue with him. We'll see how that progresses into the summer. But I just expect that to be a committee backfield as it's been throughout Greg Roman's time as an offensive coordinator, both in Baltimore and San Francisco. Like they're going to get multiple guys involved there. I don't think Dobbins is going to get enough work on the ground or in the passing game to, pay off where he's going at this point.
What about like when we talk about, your regular ADP, we'll call it FFPC ADP right now for football guys. Do you see certain tier breaks within that first round? Like, let's say it's let's say it's Taylor and CMC one, the big three wide receivers. And then like, is Eckler, like your 106, 107? I'm not sure. Like, which way do you see the first round kind of breaking down in terms of real value?
Yeah, I mean, I'd put Kupp in that top tier with McCaffrey and Taylor. If I can get a top 3 pick, I'm super happy. That then the next tier for me, if we're talking FFPC, I'd probably have Travis Kelce in that next tier along with Jefferson and Chase, and I'd probably have Austin Eckler. And for me, Najee Harris would be in that tier alongside Eckler. I just I love chasing volume, and I think Harris is as good a volume bet as any running back in football, even though maybe the efficiency won't be, what someone like Jonathan Taylor or Christian McCaffrey is going to put up. But I think Harris is going to get the volume to pay off. So those are kind of my top 2 tiers. And the back half of the first round gets messier where like you can make a case for, to me, most of the guys going in round 2 right now are as good as the guys going, in the final third of the first round.
Yeah, it's pretty flat. But that you could make the devil's advocate is that early second is just loaded right now. You can really put together some nice builds with that. And we're going to get into that a little bit later. But we've got to start the show out with, you had one of the best calls. I mean, you were one of the analysts in the industry really banging the table for Cooper Kupp last year. And I'll say the other Draft Sharks guys were definitely on him as well. So you guys should get a lot of credit for that. You guys named Cooper Kupp. You guys named Cooper Kupp as your comeback player of the year. Did a big article about him. Anytime you guys wrote your draft plan articles, Cooper Kupp, you had them in the 4th or 5th round tier, like as a guy you really wanted people to draft. You practically begged people to draft him. So you do think that this year, after being drafted in that range, that he's very deserving of being drafted at like the 102, 103 right now?
I do. I mean, I'm not projecting him to match what he did last year, but I really don't think he's going to fall off a whole lot. You just look at some of the efficiency stuff he posted, like 10.2 yards per target for Kupp last year. That's a great number, but it wasn't even a career high. He had 10.3 yards per target back in 2018. He only played 8 games that season, but still, that's a mark that he's proven he can get to. He scored on 11% of his catches last season. That's a high touchdown rate, but it's not like crazy high. He scored on around 8% of his catches over his first 4 NFL seasons. And then you have, Robert Woods and Odell Beckham combined for 19% of the Rams targets last season. They bring in Allen Robinson. I think he probably soaks up most of the targets that Woods and Beckham leave behind. But there is room for Kupp to again lead the league in targets by a pretty wide margin. And one more note on the Rams I think is interesting, and this kind of applies to the entire offense. Their offensive play volume was down quite a bit last year from where it had been the previous 2 seasons with Sean McVay. 62.2 plays per game for the Rams last season. That was just 18th in the league. They ran 68, 65.9, and 66.3 plays per game the previous 3 seasons. So, they were down by, 4 to 6 plays per game from where they had been. I think that's kind of just a, one-off fluke. And I think you're going to see bigger play volume from the Rams in general this season, which is going to kind of, boost everyone on that team.
It's almost like there's a lot of factors that could balance out the natural regression, as some are calling, right?
Exactly.
And then I think another point is you're bringing up Akers, you're bringing up Kupp. What if there's just a chance that Matt Stafford is just more comfortable in the system in year 2
Sure.
and is even more efficient? I mean, that offense could be scary. And also you could see the defense take a step back. That division is going to be, a pretty difficult one. So I think that there's a big range of outcomes for the Rams, but I think that, it's hard to see Kupp really falling off. And even if he did fall off slightly, he could still fall off and be wide receiver 1 overall. So he's got like a nice cushion there for sure. You also talked about another wide receiver that we're targeting early on in drafts, Devante Adams, a wide receiver who changed teams this offseason. He's on the Vegas Raiders now. Do you think that he's appropriately priced right now? Do you think he's like a value, or maybe is he a player you're targeting or fading? What's your general feeling about Devante right now?
Yeah, I don't really have a hot take on Adams. Like, I think he's fairly priced where he's going. Like, tail end of the first round feels right to me. That's about where he sits in our rankings. I think great players earn targets, and Devante Adams is a great player. He's been top 8 in PFF receiving grade in 4 straight seasons now. So maybe he doesn't see the 29% target share he's been getting in Green Bay the past few seasons, with Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller to compete with in Vegas. But I still think he's going to be, 25+% of the Raiders targets. I think he's, going to finish in the top 10 among receivers and targets, probably inside the top 5. And it's a quarterback downgrade from Rodgers to Carr, no doubt about that. But Derek Carr, he's the butt end of plenty of jokes. But I think he's a pretty good quarterback. I mean, he was top 7 in the NFL last season in passing yards, completion rate, and yards per attempt, and that was without Devante Adams. So now he gets a big upgrade at wide receiver there. One more note on the Raiders too, and it's kind of similar to what I just talked about with the Rams, but the Packers were a slow offense the past few seasons, especially last year. They were actually dead last in situation neutral pace. Last season, they were just 16th in offensive plays, 15th in pass attempts. I think the Raiders are going to be a faster paced offense, run more plays, and probably throw more passes this season than the Packers did last year. So, the pie that Adams is going to be eating from, I think is going to be a bit bigger in Vegas than it was in Green Bay.
JD, you're on Adams right now?
No, I to be honest, I haven't so far. I just prefer other guys in that range. Like, I was going to do some over the OTC with you guys, with guys that I like better in that range, like CeeDee Lamb or Adams for you, Jared?
Adams. I just think he's a better target bet. We can talk about CD because he's interesting. I mean, he just hasn't earned targets at a super high rate yet, but it's definitely possible, I think, this year with Cooper and Gallup. Cooper gone and Gallup out for the start of the season.
Yeah, Adams for me as well. And I think it's like Adams by kind of a slight tier. He's like a tier above, in my opinion. Adams is like, and I don't know, Jared, if you're thinking this way, but if you're getting like the 111, the 112, I feel like Adams could be part of like a high upside build from those spots. So like I'm into Adams. I definitely don't have him in the Kupp, Jefferson, Chase tier. I just think for me it's like, how low can you rank him? I mean, he's such a great player.
Yeah. He's in that second tier.
Yeah,
he's for sure in the second tier.
So.
He's with Diggs, he's with T. Higgins, AJ Brown, Debo, and then Tyreek Hill for me.
Yeah, well, if I'm picking like 110 or 111, and especially if Steph Diggs is off the board, again, that's where I like grabbing Devante Adams, because I know there's going to be a running back I like coming back around to me in the second that I take. I mean, you could start RBRB. I have no issue with that. But if we're talking, FFPC, full PPR, I'd rather grab Adams, Jared, the elite.
Can't do RBRB, man. Come on, dude.
yeah, you can. I know it's not cool, but you can do it.
That's actually an interesting. It's not on the show sheet, but when you start doing your projections, maybe years back, a lot of rankers and analysts didn't necessarily like when a wide receiver changed teams. Now with so many elite wide receivers changing teams, have you kind of adjusted your thought process and now maybe you don't even care about it, or is it something you still keep in the back of your mind?
I mean, I remember fading Hopkins and Steph Diggs. I believe they changed teams the same season, right? It was a few years ago now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember fading both of them because I actually did an article on Draft Sharks looking at wide receivers that changed teams, and the majority of them scored fewer fantasy points in their first season with a new team. But so that's still in the back of my mind. But I think Hopkins and Diggs prove that when you have an elite wide receiver, and the Raiders paid what they paid to get Devante Adams, they're going to make sure he gets the football. And again, I don't have quarterback concerns. They're Carr is not as good as Aaron Rodgers, but I don't think it's going to be a disaster. They obviously have the chemistry from their days together at Fresno State, so it's a case by case basis. I think you still got to consider that when these wide receivers are changing teams. But again, when it's an elite talent like Adams, I'm not worried about it.
Let's get 1912 Fantasy, who, by the way, was the first to join the listener league that we announced at the end of last show. So if you guys are listening, we've got a few spots filled. We're going to fill the first one. If we can fill the second one, we will. We'll see how much interest there is. But if you guys are interested, just send a quick email at goatdistrict@gmail and give us your full name, your username, or your Twitter handle, and we'll hook you guys up with a spot in this year's listener league. I think we'll do it till the end of June. Theo, maybe take registrations, and then we can set it up for July, maybe second half of July.
Yeah, that sounds about right. It'll fill pretty quick. So if you're listening to this and you want to draft with us, we're gonna get it filled. We'd love to have some of our great listeners on for that one. So 1912 wants to know: Do you have a cup this year?
No, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say there's not going to be a 5th round receiver that ends up leading the position in fantasy points by a wide margin. So there's probably not going to be a Cooper Kupp this year. I will say a guy kind of in that mold, definitely not a sleeper, a guy going, in that 4th, 5th round range. I really am high on this season is Mike Williams. That's just an offense I want a piece of. The Chargers were great last year. There's so much continuity on that offense. I think they're just going to pick up right where they left off. And I don't think Keenan Allen is, going to hit the wall or that he's done, but I think he's probably past his peak at this point, where I still think Mike Williams is kind of on the up and up. And Williams was actually better than Allen last year. If you look at metrics like PFF receiving grade, yards per route run, Allen was actually the more efficient player. So I think there's a chance this season we see Mike Williams, pass up Keenan Allen as the top target in that passing game.
Agreed.
No, I love the call. So you heard it here first. Jared wants you to draft Mike Williams in that 4th, 5th, 6th range. Is there a player that's maybe not a wide receiver that you see have maybe he's not quite the league winner, but just a massive value in that 4th or 5th round? We could throw the 6th round in there as well if you want to take it that deep.
I'm trying to think. I mean, Saquon Barkley sticks out to me. I know he's a 2nd rounder at this point, but I just to me the only knock against Saquon Barkley is the injury stuff, and I just think that tends to be fluky, and that's not a reason I tend to fade guys. Travis Etienne's on our list. I know we're going to talk about him later. But I think he has the potential, if we're talking full PPR, he can have an Alvin Kamara type season where you talk about, nice rushing production, but I think he could, really just have a massive season in the passing game in Doug Peterson's offense. So that's a guy that sticks out to me that I'm, targeting in that, 4th, 5th round range.
We can jump to that question. Right now, the two biggest movers, besides Saquon, who's kind of settled in, I think, if you're drafting NFFC or you're drafting FFWC or FFPC, he's pretty much settled in at the 2nd round. But you have two huge movers, Etienne and also Michael Pittman. Michael Pittman is on this meteoric rise right now, where he's going to be drafted as, I think he's going to be drafted as a wide receiver 1 by the end of the summer, and he's going in that range right now. Do you think Michael Pittman and you brought up Etienne are appropriately priced and potentially league winner types?
To me, league winner's a bit strong for Michael Pittman, just because I just think the Colts offense is going to continue to be run leaning and lean on Jonathan Taylor. I'm not sure there's going to be enough volume there for Pittman to be a true league winner. I definitely think he could finish as a wide receiver 1, but like you said, Theo, that's basically what he's being drafted as at this point. So I think he's fine where he's going. He had a really nice second season. He finished PPR wide receiver 18 last year, and that was with iffy quarterback play on a run heavy offense. 26% target share for Pittman last year, which is super encouraging. So I definitely like him. I'm not, I don't think he's a massive value where he's going at this point.
Just for instance, you brought up Mike Williams versus Michael Pittman. Which way are you going there?
Mike Williams, just based on the strength of the offense and the fact that the Chargers play so fast and they're so pass heavy.
Where are you on Rashad Bateman? He's I find a nice value at receiver right now. He's going behind guys that I would take Bateman over. Chris Godwin, a guy coming off injury, maybe more to fight with for those targets. Maybe not as much a half pass heavy offense, but if he's the number one guy, I like Bateman's value right now.
Yeah, I like Bateman a lot. He's a guy I keep trying to push higher up our rankings. I got to fudge the projections a little bit to get him up there. My issue with Bateman is I do think, and I guess this is dependent on the recoveries of Dobbins and Gus Edwards, but I do think Baltimore probably leans back more towards the run like they did their previous few seasons. They ended up going much pass heavier last year. I think that was largely because of all the running back injuries they suffered last summer. They kind of had to push towards the pass. But I think this year you're going to see them, probably be under 50% pass like they were, back in like 2019, 2018. So that caps Bateman a little, but I mean, unless they add something at wide receiver, Bateman could be a 26 to 28% target share guy. And if he's there, then even if Baltimore is run heavy, there's going to be enough volume there for, Bateman to, finish as a top 25 fantasy guy.
You wrote a great article. It was a best ball article, but you brought up a couple of other wide receiver values.
Yep.
Maybe you could share some other wide receivers you view as values right now. And two players that you mentioned in the article were Brandon Cooks and Chase Claypool. Maybe you could go into a little further detail on those two.
I mean, Cooks is just undervalued every year. I'm not really sure why. I mean, I get it at this point. He's like, he's a Texans wide receiver. He's not super young anymore. I mean, the guy's still super effective. You look at PFF receiving grade, yards per route run, all that efficiency stuff. He's still, among the top 20 in the NFL. He saw big volume last year. I don't think that's going to change. I mean, all Houston did was add John Mechie, who, is an undersized slot guy coming off an ACL. Like, I don't think he's going to contribute a whole lot this season. So Cooks is still going to see a ton of volume. He finished wide receiver 21 last year, and he's going, 7-8 spots lower than that in ADP right now. And Davis Mills flashed last year, and Cooks was more productive in games with Davis Mills than he was in the other games. So I think, it could be a quarterback upgrade for Cooks this year over what he had seen the previous few seasons.
Yeah, 27% target share guy last year, and it's hard to see him really dip below that level. So that's a great call. What about Claypool, though? He's kind of polarizing. Yeah. Some players seem to be completely off Claypool. What are your thoughts about him this year?
Yeah, and I totally get the concerns. I get the con side with Claypool, but like to me, he's just totally priced at his floor, and like people aren't considering the ceiling he brings. I mean, he's wide receiver 49 on FFPC right now. He finished wide receiver 38 last year, and again, it wasn't a great season. There were issues with Claypool that are at least semi concerning, but even if you consider that his floor, it's 10 spots higher than he's being drafted right now. But again, I just I look at the upside here. PPR wide receiver 22 as a rookie, Claypool was, and that was with Ben Roethlisberger, who wasn't great 2 years ago. He's 23 years old. He's a 6'4", 240 pounder, 99th percentile athleticism. I just think again the ceiling is still there. And it's not priced in if he's going wide receiver 49 in drafts. I think he should be going at least 10 spots higher.
I'm always a sucker for Claypool.
Canadian boy, man. How can you not be? Mapletron.
There you go.
We got a couple guys. Joey Brown, who just took one of those spots in the league. Of course, Joey, we appreciate you, man. And Matthew Bingham, just bringing him Cortland Sutton. Maybe you can comment on the Denver receivers. We see Judy and Sutton kind of going up and down and trading places in the drafts these days.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to be in on both, with the massive quarterback upgrade they're getting. And I think Sutton and Judy are both big-time talents. I actually prefer Judy. We have Judy ranked higher right now. I believe Sutton's going higher in ADP still. And Sutton's season last year was kind of alarming, just how little he did in games Judy played. And Sutton was great in those games Judy missed when he had the ankle injury. But when Judy came back, Sutton was like invisible. Like he was not even getting targets. And I don't know, maybe that was just a quarterback play.
First year back from injury, no?
First year back from injury, definitely. But it's tough to blame that, though, because, again, Sutton was so good early in the season. He was so productive early on. It was like weeks 2 through 7 or 8 when Judy was out, and Sutton was awesome. So it's kind of tough to blame the ACL when he kind of showed he could do it again. But then as soon as Judy came back, Sutton kind of disappeared. So it's concerning. I still believe in Sutton as a player. I liked him as a prospect. He had a good couple of first seasons before that ACL. But again, I just prefer Judy right now.
Okay. I was going to just say, like, could conditioning maybe play a factor, like him not playing out the season, you know what I mean, down the stretch that way? We have, definitely possible. Okay. Quick other one, Theo, from 1912, asking about the rookie receivers. I know we're going to touch on it a bit, but we're talking receivers. London, Burks, Moore, and Olave. What are your takes on these guys? Do you have a favorite maybe and maybe a least favorite?
Yeah, London's my favorite. And he was actually my wide receiver 1 in the class before the draft. But he's my favorite more because he just has such a great path to targets there. I mean, there's very little competition at wide receiver. I know the quarterback play is going to be iffy in Atlanta. The entire offense is probably going to be iffy, but I just think they're going to be trailing. It's going to be Drake London and Kyle Pitts seeing vast majority of the targets there. So volume wise, London's pretty clearly my favorite rookie wide receiver for redraft.
Do you see any others making an impact? I know there's some on the Olave train right now.
Yeah.
Trey Burks is going pretty much neck and neck with Drake London in football guys type drafts. Is there any others that you see making a potential redraft impact this year?
Yeah, I definitely think Burks will. Just because I think he has a pretty nice path to targets too. We'll see how Robert Woods does coming off the ACL, but even if Woods is healthy, I think Burks probably gets to around 100 or so targets. Hopefully the Titans use him in the running game too. I think he can do that. He's that Deebo Samuel-esque player with the ball in his hands. I hope he can get a carry or 2 per game. I think that would help the fantasy value. Chris Olave is becoming more and more interesting the longer Michael Thomas's ankle injury lingers, and it's crowded there now with Jarvis Landry added to the mix. But man, I'm not sure what to make of Michael Thomas right now, and if he's not on the field or not himself, I think Olave could definitely be a factor this season.
Yeah, I like Thomas earlier in the season. Theo, at his prices, like in the February, March drafts, he was a lot nicer, but now it's getting kind of up there in the 5th and 6th round.
Yeah, you might get stuck with a guy not playing, JD, because I don't have any hope for Michael Thomas. And I could see the initial like thoughts, he's going to come back, but the guy he hasn't done anything now for like 3 years. And I think we're hoping for, him to come back and just embrace, being a saint and all this stuff. And I'm just like, I don't know. I don't see myself drafting him at all.
Especially with the opportunity cost that you're missing out on, you know what I mean, in these rounds by taking him, it's risky.
Yeah, 6th round Thomas versus like a guy you brought up, Bateman, like those Amon-Ra St. Brown, these guys who are younger, they're going to be there and all that sort of thing.
Elijah Moore.
Yeah, it's just for me, I can't pull the trigger on that one. So what we could pivot over. Is there any other wide receivers, JD, you want to ask Jared about? I was going to pivot over to a different position.
No, I think we touched on. I was trying to look if we missed anything. Do you maybe give us your quick Cole's notes on the Miami guys with Tyreek Hill? I don't think we touched on in Waddle.
Yeah, that's an interesting situation because the ADPs on Hill and Waddle compared to Tua don't really make sense to me. Like, if Hill and Waddle are going to finish top 15, which is where they're going in ADP, Tua is going to finish a lot higher than where he's being drafted among quarterbacks, or vice versa. Like to me, Jalen Waddle is a bit overvalued right now. I just think he had a nice rookie season. I think he's a nice player, but he really feasted off volume last year. I think he had 140 something targets. I just think that's probably going to come down a bit with Hill there. I think Miami might push towards the run a little bit more under Mike McDaniel. I mean, that he's come from the Kyle Shanahan tree, and that scheme, does lean on the running game quite a bit. So I just don't think Waddle's going to match his targets last year. He's a bit overvalued for me. And I think Tyreek Hill's fine where he's going. I think, he's a good enough player where even with the quarterback downgrade, he's going to be fine.
You like Hill as would you consider him in the second round, or are you more comfortable taking him in the third?
Yeah, I think late, back half of the second round, I'm comfortable with him. If I could pair him with a Cooper Kupp or one of those elite running backs, CMC or Taylor, I'd be pretty happy.
Yeah, I think like you talk about, and we'll talk about range of outcomes a little bit later, but like Tyreek Hill is one of those guys that it could be laughable where he's going in some of these drafts. I mean, that could be one of the outcomes of this season for sure.
Theo, before you jump to the next one, let's give some quick love to our friends at the FFPC. They're our partners in this. They support us. We support them. We love playing on their site. We love smashing drafts for $1 million right now, guys. In the main event, you can play for $500,000 in football, guys. With an early bird special, you get a $35 credit when you buy 3 teams. And the best ball, Theo, you and I are teaming up to build the winning roster of the $200,000 grand prize right now as we speak. We'll be doing a ball-in episode on that to review the draft board. And of course, your favorite, Theo. I did a quick, and Jared, you might be interested on this. I did a quick poll on the old Twitter sphere, just looking at like dynasty versus redraft versus DFS versus best ball. And Dynasty, surprisingly enough, I don't know if that's just our following, but crushed it by like 85% to, spreading out the other 3. So you got to love the degenerates voting for that in the middle of June. The Dynasty, don't forget the startups, guys, starting at $77 at the FFPC, myffpc.com. And that's the site that the listener league will be on. So if you want to be in the league and you're not already in the site, tag Theo or myself or at Goat District, and we'll hook you up with a free sign-up bonus when you sign up on the site.
They're symbiotic, JD. Like you got to do best ball, you got to play dynasty, and you got to do redraft. They all go hand in hand, and I think a lot of players are in for all 3. And I think when you do all 3, it makes you better at all 3. We've dragged a couple of redraft people into the dynasty realms. We've dragged a couple of people over in the best ball streets, and it's just like once you get into the routines of the off season, you're going to want to be doing all 3. So. Jared, you're an all 3 guy, aren't you?
Oh, of course. I mean, in Dynasty especially, like the depth of knowledge you need to play Dynasty, and also the understanding of like the macro, of all these teams, the understanding you need to have of that stuff to play Dynasty really helps when you get down to the redraft stuff.
Absolutely, and like JD's talked about, like the best ball, like the growth of Underdog and all these best ball tournaments just make you such a sharper drafter. It's one of the best ways to get ready for your higher stakes drafts is those $5 drafts where you're playing for some skin, you're playing for a big major prize, and you have to make quick decisions on the clock. I think that those are, and you can do experimental builds. So, why wouldn't you be doing best ball in the offseason?
Got to get those reps in.
Yeah, 100%.
And use the code district, guys. Get that $100 sign-up bonus on Underdog while we're at it. Go draft for $2 million, guys. Come on. No brainer.
For sure. So we just talked wide receivers. Jared, you crushed it. We all got a lot out of those wide receiver takes, but we got to go over to tight end. We keep mentioning the FFPC tight end premium. One player that you're very higher on, you have him high up in the ranks for tight ends, is Dallas Goddard. Could you explain your expectations for him and why you're so bullish? And is he a potential tight end premium league winner at the tight end spot?
I think he could be a league winner when you factor in his ADP right now. I'm just surprised there's not more hype on Goddard because I feel like for years we all waited for him to be freed of Zach Ertz, and then it finally happened last year, and the results were strong. Goddard scored as the tight end 5 in his 10 healthy games post Zach Ertz trade, and that was with the Eagles going super run heavy. They were the run heaviest team in the NFL over the last 10 or so weeks of the season. I think they're going to push more towards the pass this season. I think I would assume the concern with Goddard for people is, AJ Brown's arrival, and he pairs up with Devante Smith to give him a strong wide receiver duo. And what is that going to mean to Goddard's volume? But I just think for one, Goddard's just good at football. He's been top 10 among tight ends in yards per route run in 3 straight seasons now, including a first place finish last year. He led all qualifying tight ends in yards per route run last season. So I think he's one of the best pass catching tight ends in the NFL. He also saw a 25% target share in those 10 games without Zach Ertz. So, that can come down 3-4 percentage points, and he can still, finish among the top 5 tight ends in target share. Nick Sirianni's offense, he comes from the Frank Reich coaching tree. That offense tends to utilize tight ends heavily in the passing game. We saw it when Sirianni was in Indianapolis. We saw it last year. Eagles tight ends last year combined for 24.5% into the team's targets. League average tight end target share is around 20%. So they were well above league average there. So I just think it's still an offense that's going to feature the tight end in the passing game, even with A.J. Brown's arrival. And again, I just think Goddard is good enough where, he's not going to get phased out.
I love the take. I think he's, like you said, he's an extremely talented player. And I think we get caught up into, the metrics are super important. I don't want to sound like a meathead, but at the end of the day, talented players end up having big-time seasons in the NFL. And I think what's interesting is I discussed this with some people on Twitter. I had a football guys draft where I drafted Dallas Goddard at the 608. And I just thought it was notable, not just for getting him, near the 7th round, which I think is fine value, but the fact that Dalton Schultz is going 2 rounds ahead of Dallas Goddard.
Yeah.
To me, it's just that's such an overcorrection on Schultz. And I know there's some really sharp people on Schultz, but like the Schultz versus Goddard argument where I can draft a better player 2 rounds later that I think is a much more talented player who, like you said, in the range of outcomes could end up outscoring him. Like, what would you percentage chance? I would say Goddard, Schultz, even if you take a bullish stance on Schultz, it's still like 55-45. But I think the ceiling of a Goddard is higher than the ceiling of the Schultz. Would you have that take?
Yeah, and I like Schultz. If you ask me to put a percentage on, I'd say 60-40 in Goddard's favor that he scores more fantasy points this season. But I do like Dalton Schultz. Kind of same story with TJ Hawkinson. I'm looking at ADP right now. He's going over a full round ahead of Dallas Goddard, and you could definitely argue Schultz and Hawkinson just ahead of Goddard in the rankings. But even in that case, they'd be just ahead, and I don't think there should be 2 or even a round difference in ADP on them. So I do, to me, Goddard right now is, one of the best values at tight end.
Yeah, and I think them going and getting A.J. Brown is like the pie could get larger. It could create just that offense could just be supercharged this year, and maybe they want Jalen Hurts to pass more often. It seems like they do. They added weapons, and I think it's going to be really fun to see Smith and Goddard out there with A.J. Brown, and I think Goddard could be super sneaky. JD, where are your take on Goddard?
Yeah, he's, we just talked about the 2 guys that I guess it's funny because TJ Hawk was going ahead of both of those guys, earlier in the offseason. He was going ahead of whether you're doing redraft or, best ball or whatever it was, Schultz and TJ Hawk, TJ Hawk. And then it was Goddard, and then it was Schultz later on. And now Schultz obviously creeped up. I like Goddard. I like that offense just as a whole, Philly. I think people, the doubters in Hurts and the doubters in A.J. Brown going there and what he can do there, I think is giving them some good value at where they're going. I think for all the pieces, I can't get mad at anyone taking Goddard there. I personally don't grab him off in there just because of the way I have my builds. I either, grab one of the studs early. Now I find myself going later and just taking later guys. I find that the deeper I go into the offseason, the more I'm comfortable doing that. Kind of the reverse of the running backs, where I'm more reluctant or less reluctant to do like a hyper fragile running back build closer I get to the season as opposed to early in the season. And it's kind of similar with the tight ends. You're more comfortable taking those shots. I know Matthew was asking about a guy that Theo and I got the wrong one. We'll come back to that one. But he was asking about a guy that Theo and I started discussing. And Matthew here is asking about Hayden Hurst going in Cincinnati. How do you feel, Jared, as a tight end too? I know personally, and I don't know, Theo, you can answer after Jared, but I'm more comfortable with him as a tight end 3 personally. You can definitely maybe try to slide him in as a tight end 2, but you better add some depth to that tight end room, in my opinion, in that build.
Yes, I mean, we have Hurst ranked tight end 22. So he does slide into that low end tight end 2 territory in our rankings. CJ Uzomah finished I'm pulling it up right now. He was tight end 19 last season. Only on 63 targets. That's kind of the concern. You're going to see Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd obviously be the clear top 3 in that passing game. But I do think, Hurst is, as good, if not better, of a pass catcher than CJ Uzomah. The other thing with Cincinnati too that I like is if you guys remember early on in the season, even into the midway part of the season, they were still a pretty run-leaning offense. It wasn't until the final few games of the regular season and then into the playoffs, they became pass-heavy. And I think that's going to continue now in 2022 with, Joe Burrow having the injury another year behind him and Jamar Chase doing what he did as a rookie along with T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. So I do think you're going to see the pass volume climb in Cincinnati this season, which, should help Hurst as well.
Yeah, the Hurst one's interesting. And I feel like he's sometimes an overlooked guy in best ball, but I think like Jared brought up, like Uzomah was the kind of guy that would have his kind of scoring in bunches. You'd have multiple touchdown games and, you'll have those games where the tight end is just running free for Cincinnati based on all the weapons. So Hurst is interesting. Like, we liked him as a prospect a lot. I think that, he had some production for Atlanta. And then last year, the whole Kyle Pitts coming there. So he's kind of like a post-type guy that's a little bit under the radar. He's definitely one to monitor. And just, Jared, you brought up Travis Kelce earlier. JD talked about how his philosophy on tight ends, either going tight end early or late. You brought up Goddard as a guy you're targeting in the mid rounds. What's your general approach to the tight end position? Are you open to different strategies, or what do you find yourself doing when you're doing your builds?
Yeah, so on Kelce, I actually think he might be undervalued right now. We're all trying to figure out like which of these Chiefs receivers is going to hit, and I'm sure one or two of them are. But like, what if Travis Kelce just sets a career high in target share and targets this season?
80% target share.
Yeah, I mean we'll take 30 even or 25, but I just think he could see massive volume this season. So FFPC again, middle of the first round. I like Travis Kelce, and even on like underdog, I like him in the back half of the first round, or even anywhere in round 2. I think he's a great pick. So for me, it's kind of like Kelce if I can get him in the first or second. Then like Goddard becomes my next target, and then there's two guys going pretty late that I really like. The first one's David Njoku, who I've always been a fan of, since he came into the league, and it's been a rocky start to his career. He did have the top 10 fantasy season in his second year in the league, and then he's been quieter the past 3 seasons as he's had to share time with Austin Hooper, and there's been quarterback issues in Cleveland. But I still think he's a big time talent. He's still just 26 years old, or he turns 26 in July actually. The Browns gave him a big contract this offseason. They actually franchise tagged him to start, and they agreed to a new contract, 4 years, $55 million. It makes Njoku the 5th highest paid tight end in the NFL. So, that tells me they want to use this guy. Deshaun Watson, obviously the big question in Cleveland, if he's going to play, how many games he's going to play, that's going to impact Njoku. But Njoku's going late enough where I'm definitely taking the plunge on him right now. I think he could be a top 12 tight end when you look at his talent plus the quarterback upgrade he's hopefully going to get.
Yeah, that's only the second time that the Browns have ever franchise tagged a player since they moved back to Cleveland. It was like a notable thing. And now you're right, he's getting paid a fortune. So he's one that, obviously the Watson situation hanging over our heads, but Njoku is super, super interesting. Yeah. 2 tight ends you didn't mention. Actually, we could push it to 3. Kyle Pitts and Mark Andrews and Darren Waller. Do you just see them as maybe going a little too high for you, or do you think that they're justifiable to take Mark Andrews like end of the first in the FFPC, Pitts in the second? Like, do you think those prices are going to be decent win rates on those, or you're kind of down on that?
Andrews tends to go a little too high for me. I just think he benefited last year from the Ravens going pass heavier. He easily set a career high in targets. I think that's going to dip a bit in 2022. I mean, he's fine. I don't want people to be outright avoiding him, but he's not a guy I've taken at ADP much. And I think Pitts and Waller are kind of fairly valued. Pitts, obviously awesome talent. He's going to see the volume, and I think he probably even out-targets Drake London. I think he should lead Atlanta in targets this season. The quarterback play is a concern, but I think he's going to see enough volume and is good enough to produce in spite of it. And then Waller, the concern is any dip in volume for him with Devante Adams there. Again, I do think that Raiders offense is going to be fast-paced and pretty pass-heavy under Josh McDaniels. So I think there's going to be enough to go around for Waller. I actually think Renfro is probably the guy that's going to take a bigger hit with Adams' arrival than Waller is.
What about, I'll just throw a kind of a group. It seems like the ADP on tight ends, I think, is pretty clear right now, and I don't think it's going to change too much, at least in the top let's say 8 tight ends. I think as the summer moves along, they'll kind of stay locked in. But there's that like next group of tight ends. Do you think that there's any value in drafters drafting Ertz, Freiermuth, Knox, and then we'll throw our boy Cole Kmet as tight end 12? But he's not always tight end 12, but he's definitely sliding in.
You're missing the most important top 12 tight end, Theo. Come on, Alberto, man. Come on.
Oh, Alberto's slipping, JD. You're going to get Alberto. Like,
good.
Yeah.
More
no,
value.
listen, I
love it.
We can ask your opinion on Alberto after those guys. But do you think like that kind of like the middle tier of tight end? Do you see any value in attacking those guys?
Not particularly, because I just think the guys going a lot of the next like 8 to 10 tight ends in ADP to me are similar in value, and some of them even have more upside. Ertz is the one guy I like. He was just really good, saw a lot of volume after being traded to Arizona last season. Then with DeAndre Hopkins out for the first 6 games last season or this coming season, I think you're going to see Ertz soak up a good amount of volume, at least early on in the season. The other guys I'm not super high on. I don't know. You guys like Cole Kmet? I'm not a big fan of the player, but I do think he's going to get a good volume this season. So I think
it's a narrow target tree. We talk about often. Dan loves Kmet's his guy. Who's fighting? Who's he fighting with for targets? Right, Mooney and.
I just think like what JD said. I think he'd get 120 targets. So I think he could be like. So I don't know. I don't think he can. Like Kmet to me is a guy where I think he's got a considerably high floor, but I think he tops out by his ceiling based on the offense. But where he's being drafted, like you can get him in the 10th round or lower. So I think he's interesting. Why don't we go ahead and JD's a big fan of Albert O this season. Do you think that maybe drafters are overreacting to the Dulcich stuff and Albert O becomes a value? I know like in this particular draft, we see him going like tight end 16, tight end 17, tight end 18 level. So like when we started drafting, after the draft and Fant got moved, we saw Alberto being drafted as like tight end 11, tight end 12. So it seems kind of like the market's moving a lot on him. What's your take on him, maybe as a player and situation?
Yeah, and it's funny too, because like, we have our rankings and projections up all throughout the offseason. So like, Albert O before the Noah Fant trade was, down in the 30s. And then he did get inside of our top 12, after the Fant trade before they drafted Dulcich. He's down 5 or 6 spots from there now. Rookie tight ends usually don't do a whole lot. So I don't want to overrate the Dulcich addition there. It is interesting, they took Dulcich in the 3rd round of this year's draft. Albert O was only a 4th round pick. So they've invested more in Dulcich. But what Albert O has done in limited action over, especially last year, he was good. He was up near the top of the league in yards per route run among tight ends. And with the quarterback upgrade there, you could definitely see, at least a quasi breakout season. I do think, there's the target competition is tough. We talked about Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. Tim Patrick is a good wide receiver too. We'll see what Denver gets from KJ Hamler. I'm not, super optimistic about what he's going to do coming off his injuries. It's just tough target competition for Alberto, but he could definitely be super efficient with his talent level and the quarterback upgrade he's getting with Russell Wilson arriving.
So he had 10% target share last year, right, in 2021. So you got to think with Fant gone. I know the rookies there, and in the middle of May they like to talk about the rookies. That's for sure. But to me, like Theo just announced to me, it looks like I'll be getting some more Alberto at value. I like him. I just love what he showed last year. He gave you 6 top 24 weeks last year, again, kind of with a very limited role in that offense. And now you have this huge upgrade. A lot of reasons to like it. So what was the other?
We have also historical, like sometimes we talk about like crowded, and we're going to talk about ambiguous situations with Jared on some other positions, but like crowded tight end rooms sometimes, or the perception of it, produce big ADP winners. Yeah. Like the Schultz-Jarwin produced a big winner.
That's a perfect example.
Higbee Everett produced a big winner years back where we got the big Higbee season. So I do think that like Dulcich is a player that's interesting. I think he's got very good receiver skills, but you could see when Alberto, a player of his size and athleticism with this potential opportunity, it gets to a point where you can draft him as your tight end too. he gets more and more interesting when he falls into like tight end 18. He's going to be a guy we talk about like all summer long. Is there any other tight ends you want to ask Jared about, JD?
Tonyan, Robert Tonyan's another guy I love. Just what we saw a couple of years ago with, again, talking narrow target trees. Now Adams is gone. Everybody's talking up Lazard. I love just waiting, grabbing Rodgers at a value right now because everybody's, poo-pooing him before another MVP season. And, stacking him with Tonyan way later in these tight end preems is one of my favorites. How do you feel about the tight end?
Yeah, so I'm looking at ADP. Tonyan's tight end 21 on FFPC. I think that's fair. His underdog FFPC or ADP is crazy. He's like tight end 14 on underdog. So I've gone nowhere near him there. But I do think tight end 21 is fair on FFPC. I mean, he's coming off the injury. We'll see on that. His one big season in Green Bay a couple of years ago, that was just insane touchdown rate that he's obviously not going to repeat. But he definitely has a chance to set a new career high in targets this season with Adams gone. So I'm definitely okay with him if you're getting him around tight end 20.
What's your play? Just your general. I know it's not in the questions, but we talked about this the other day. That I find the underdog ADP after doing a lot of FFPC drafts and the other leagues that we talk about on here that I can't think of right now. But I find the underdog is just all over the place, and there's bigger volumes, right? Because they've got the puppy, the $5, and then I'm sure it's all affecting that. What's your take on playing the the ADPs in each of these leagues to kind of gain an edge?
Yeah, it's a great opportunity. Someone like Tonyan, you're not going to get shares of him on underdog, or at least I'm not at that ADP. But if he's going, 7 tight end spots later in FPC, that's the spot to grab him. So you definitely got to pay attention to that and know where to grab guys. I still think on underdog, a lot of people don't react enough to the fact that it's just half PPR. I think people still draft if it's full PPR, and it makes a big difference. I know it's just half point of cash, but it really does make a difference when you're evaluating players, both within positions and then when you're evaluating, a running back versus a wide receiver or whatever. It really does matter.
Evan Engram, we got brought up in the chat. Your thoughts on him?
He's actually the other guy on my list I wanted to bring up, a guy that I've been drafting a lot of. And man, I didn't want to be high on him because, you guys know it's Evan Engram. He's, just been frustrating.
It's hard not to.
He's broke your heart a couple times.
His price, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, he's so cheap. What is he on? Pulling up. Yeah, even on FFPCs.
He's 13th round in the FFPC. That's tight end preem.
Yeah, he's 13th round, tight end 25. Man, I know he's had his injury issues, but he finishes a top 7 tight end in fantasy points per game each of his first 3 seasons. He's still just 28 years old in September. Jacksonville gave him just a 1-year deal, but they gave him $9 million. So it was a pretty big investment. And then Doug Peterson's offense, you go back to his time in Philly, he peppered tight ends with targets. And I know they had Zach Ertz and Dallas Goddard for some of that time, so that played some part of it. But I do think that's an offense that does want to feature the tight end. And I think the fact that they gave Evan Engram $9 million is a pretty good indication that they want him to be a big part of the offense. We'll see if he can stay healthy. But again, just the price he's going at, tight end 25, I think he's a no-brainer there.
Quick OTC for you guys. Engram or Higbee?
Engram.
Yeah, I'm going Engram too. I mean, Higbee's definitely safer, but I think Ingram's more likely to finish as a top 12 tight end in my mind.
Engram or Gerald Everett?
Engram.
I'll stick with Engram. Ingram's the Jacksonville also brought in, they got panned for the Kirk signing. They got panned for the Jones signing because they kind of paid those guys a little too much. But everything that they've done has been adding these guys with a ton of speed. And I think that Peterson will actually utilize it, where you watched, sometimes the past couple of years in New York, you'd say, what are they doing with Engram? Finally they I'll echo what Jared said, you get a coach who actually knows how to use the tight end, and a situation where he could potentially come away with kind of a late career bump. I think he's super interesting, and I'll speak for Dan since he's not on tonight. Dan is a big fan of the Engram situation as well. So we're glad to see you're on him. And I'm super stoked to see you on.
And those are two guys that are going ahead of him right now in the football guys championship on the FFPC.
Yeah, no, for sure. And if you wanted to go in some of these builds, you could grab a Komet in the 10th round and then follow up and take an Engram, and you haven't used much draft capital, and you might have a floor guy with a potential ceiling guy. So there's different ways to play the tight end spot this year. It'll be interesting to see the win rates at the end of the year for the Kelsey and the Pitts drafters versus the weight on tight end. it could be a fun wait on tight end type year. We talked a little bit about Denver. It's not on the show sheet, but you've written some good stuff on Russell Wilson. There's been some good stuff written about him in general on Draft Sharks. He's a player who you're a fan of. Maybe you could share your expectations for him in a big bounce back year this year in Denver.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at his season long numbers last year, you might be concerned, and you look at his age. I think he's like 33 or 34 now. So maybe there's a chance he's hit the wall or whatever. But I look at the splits pre and post finger injury, and he was still awesome before that finger injury. Then his next 6 or 7 games after the injury is when he really struggled, and even the last 2 or 3 games of last season, he kind of started to get it going again. So I think he's going to bounce back from a real life perspective. I still think he's an excellent quarterback and has years left on him. And then it's just a good situation in Denver with the weapons. Maybe not quite as strong as Metcalf plus Lockett, but you have Sutton and Judy, and then you have Tim Patrick and Albert O. It might be even deeper, weapons wise than what he had in Seattle. And the other thing too is he's finally freed of Pete Carroll. We could definitely see Wilson set a new career high in pass attempts this season. Maybe Denver actually lets Russ cook a little bit.
Yeah, and you had also brought up Carr, Herbert, and Mahomes. I mean that division. If any division set up to have shootouts, it's got to be that one. You've got that Week 17 Denver Kansas City game. It's just like, how could you not want a piece of that? So yeah, we're glad to see you guys on Russell Wilson. And just we've been talking redraft, but is Denver a team you're trying to build stacks with in best ball as well, Jared?
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting too, if you're looking for that Week 17 correlation with that Broncos Chiefs game. I don't love Mahomes at ADP right now, but like I said, I like Kelsey, and then all his wide receivers are cheap enough just because there's so much uncertainty there. I think it's pretty easy to build a Denver stack and then run it back with 1 or 2 of those Chiefs skill position guys.
We want to talk about the 101. Right now, if you're on the clock, it's main event season. It's September for big money. Who are you taking at the 101?
If it's main event, it's like the one draft I care about. I mean, we can talk about best ball and diversifying and all that stuff.
You're a big draft for all the money. Who are you taking?
I'm taking Christian McCaffrey because I think he's going to outscore Jonathan Taylor per game. I think if both guys play 17 games, I think Christian McCaffrey scores more PPR points. Taylor's safer, and he's young. He doesn't have the injury issues that McCaffrey's had the past few seasons now. But I think if they're both on the field, McCaffrey's going to score more PPR points.
See, we could have traded our 101. We could have traded back to Jared and still got JT at 102 in that in our best ball tourney.
Well, I mean, I think it's like it's a tough decision. I mean, I think to me it's like a clear 101, 102. I'm pretty high volume, so I think I'll get some exposure to CMC at the 102. I mean, for me, it's just Taylor. I think he's younger. I like the offensive line better. I like the quarterback better. But yeah, you could. I mean, there's few players in football that are capable of averaging like 30 plus. Yeah. And CMC is one of them. So I can see the bullish take on CMC versus Taylor. And I do think there's a chance that it could be close. Like they both, the win rates for both are good. Yeah. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting one.
I just think that if you're like, even if you don't want to pick one, you have a higher chance of getting McCaffrey past the 102 than getting JT past the 101. And that's, if you kind of mix up your shares and you're, of course we put you on the spot here. We're like, dude, you're paying $1 million for this league right now. Who are you taking? And I love how you went CMC. You see the comments in the chat. That's great. You take your guy, but just even if I'm a JT guy, I'm a Colts fan. He's my guy. He's on my, Twitter profile pick. I mean, there's a little bias there, but for me, JT just offers so much, and I just love watching him. But you can't go wrong with either one of these guys. For me, it's these two, and then the receivers are those, my top 5 picks, I guess, in the first round.
One polarizing receiver we didn't touch on is DK Metcalf. I just took him at 501, actually today in a slow football guys draft. So you're starting to see him go in something like that late 4th to early 5th range. Somebody told me they saw him at a 506 recently. I don't have Fantasy Mojo open. I'm not sure, but to me, he's like settling in.
He's in the So I've got, again, I'm looking at the football guys because that's this time of year for redrafts. That's the one I'll use is DK Metcalf he's at 404.
No,
He's coming back the other way. Sorry. So he's 4.8.
Yeah. So somewhere towards that end of the fourth, early fifth.
Yeah.
Do you think that he's a quarterback proof type player? Do you see him as a guy potentially returning big value here? What's your general take of DK Metcalf when we look at it in the context of ADP?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely worried about the quarterback situation there. I hate that Seattle was such a slow offense last season. They ran easily the fewest offensive snaps in the NFL last year, and their offensive coordinator Shane Waldron is back, so like that's a concern as well. But man, everyone is worth buying at a price, and where Metcalf's going now. So we have his ADP at wide receiver 19 on FFPC. He's wide receiver 23 on Underdog. So again, that's what you got to look at ADPs, and even an Underdog, again, half PPR. I think he has more value half PPR than full. So that's where I'm especially buying DK Metcalf at wide receiver 23 on Underdog. I mean, I still think he's an elite talent. Tiny sample, obviously. Metcalf's only played 3 career games without Russell Wilson. They all came last year with Geno Smith, but he went 6 catches, 58 yards in the first one, 2 catches, 96 yards, and a touchdown in the second, and 6 catches for 43 yards and 2 touchdowns in the third. So he was fine with Geno Smith last year. I know it's only 3 games. Losing Russell Wilson's definitely going to hurt, but I still think he can, produce enough to return a profit at the ADP he's going at right now.
Yeah, like to me, it's like for me, I know like not to get too galaxy brained into structural drafting, but if you have the chance to have DK Metcalf as your flex, like in these NFFCs and FFPCs, Jack Hahn, who's one of the better high stakes players in the country, he's going to be on the GOAT District later this summer. He mentioned that he got a DK in the 5th round of an NFFC draft, which is insane. It's a start 3 wide receivers and a flex. So wide receivers go a lot higher. So it's like the market's moving where you can get DK as a flex or even a wide receiver 2. It kind of offsets the, potential that there could be, less week to week, consistency, and you can kind of put up with the peaks and valleys. I think he could be a really dynamic flex play for some big time winning team. So I'm on DK in that range. Even if one of the 3 of us was his quarterback, DK would find a way to get into the end zone.
My shoulders are done. My spine is messed. You don't want me throwing a ball, man. Come on. Hey, let's do some quick OTC, man. I'm in the OTC mode tonight. DK Metcalf or Terry McLaurin?
McLaurin.
Yeah, slightly into McLaurin. It's close though.
DK Marquise Brown.
I like DK.
Again, if it was my wide receiver 2, I'd probably want Hollywood Brown, but in a vacuum, it's a tough one, JD.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stay Hollywood Brown just because I think he could absolutely smash to start the season, and it might be like a little slow moving with DK, but they're neck and neck. I literally took Hollywood Brown at the 412 when I took DK at the 501 for this particular team. So I like them both in that range.
Yeah, I think what you touched on with the roster build, that's where DK depends for me on the roster build. That's what makes that decision, whether you start late on receiver, a little later on receiver, and you want to, you still want that last stud that's sitting there in DK, or like you said, he's your wide receiver 3 or is your flex spot. That's pretty sweet as well with the upside that you're getting. Yeah.
Like if I had Cooper Kupp in the 1st round and Tyreek Hill in the 2nd, and I was able to have DK as my wide receiver 3, I might like that over a Hollywood Brown as my,
especially after grabbing like 2 running backs in between there, like a tight end and a running back or something in between, and then coming back.
Maybe one dead zone running back for me, JD. I'm not double dipping the dead zone. I don't double dip there.
That's because you want to go a little. You like reaching a little earlier on them. We like taking our 100%. Exactly.
We touched on a couple of these ambiguous situations. So let's dive into it. Are you searching for value or avoiding the situations? I'll throw out the New England running back situation, the Kansas City running back situation.
Well, hold on. Let's take it east. Let's digest here.
Let's start running backs first.
No, let's start in New England. Just the only reason I say it, sorry, Theo, I didn't mean to cut you off, but the reason I want to start with New England, because we've got Patricia right now. And now we're hearing that he's calling the offense in New England. So I wanted to get Jared's thoughts on that, how that affects him drafting these New England players. And then for sure, we got to talk about the New England backfield situation.
Yeah, that's a concern that, they're still not sure who's going to be calling plays, or I don't know what's going on there. It's a bit concerning for sure. I also think New England's probably going to lean a bit heavier on the pass this season. Mac Jones's second season, they add Devante Parker. They spend a second round pick on Tyquan Thornton. So I, as I do most years, am trying to stay away from the Patriots backfield. I'll take shots in best ball when I don't have to worry about setting lineups. I do think Ramondre Stevenson is pretty interesting because I think Damian Harris will lead the way in carries, when these guys are healthy. But I think Stevenson can, mix in for 8 to 12 carries per game. And I think they like him in the passing game. He was good when given a chance there last year, and he was a good pass catcher in college too. You don't think of him in that way because he's a bigger back, but I think he can do it in the passing game. We'll see what happens with James White, but he's old and he's coming off a pretty serious hip injury now. So that pass catching role might be available. And if Stevenson can get that, along with 8, 10, 12 carries a game, then he could be interesting.
Dude. How about Stevenson as well? I think he's the value in New England. And like Jared said, he's got a bunch of different paths. Like if Harris goes down, Stevenson crushes. And if James White, like everybody's kind of assuming James White is going to return to full strength and be what he was. I mean, there's a chance that Stevenson just takes that pass catching role this year. And then the guy had over 600 yards rushing last year. And like Jared said, he showed like he's an efficient receiver. He maybe had 15 or so catches last year, but he's efficient and he's like a big back that can catch. So he's interesting. We saw McKinnon sign today with Kansas City. How about that Kansas City running back situation with CEH, Ronald Jones, and now McKinnon in the mix? Is there a guy you want, or are you just avoiding it?
I have reluctantly drafted some Edwards-Helaire so far this spring, and I'm probably less likely to do it now that they added McKinnon. I mean, I don't think McKinnon moves the needle a whole lot. I mean, he did nothing in the regular season last year. He was good in the playoffs, but he's 30 years old now. He lasted like 3 months into free agency before he signed. So I think he's like an insurance policy. I think the Chiefs still don't know what they have in CEH. I'm sure you guys saw the story about his gallbladder last March or whatever. He got down to 160 pounds. That explains some of why he struggled. But I don't know. He's just been underwhelming to me so far in the NFL.
In like such a good situation, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. I want to buy into the Chiefs backfield. Andy Reid has historically produced nice fantasy numbers from his running backs. But I don't love Edwards-Helaire as a player. Ronald Jones is probably the best pure runner there now. I mean, the guy just can never get out of his own way, and he's just a zero in the passing game. So it's tough to get excited about his ceiling. So it's definitely a wait and see situation for me. They're all cheap enough right now where you can definitely take shots and just see what happens.
Yeah, Rojo in the 9th. I mean, you don't have to get that excited. It's almost double digits. Maybe you wait till the 10th to see if he falls. Maybe Pat Crane's not in your draft and he falls to the 10th.
Or maybe Ronald Jones. So I think Rojo would be the one if I want to take shots on. Like JD said, I think you could see they all kind of dip in ADP. And Rojo, when he goes in that range where it's, him against like the Tyler Algiers, those sort of decisions. Because I don't know, I feel like the McKinnon signing hurts CEH more than it hurts Rojo.
Sure.
Because it takes away the pass catching. What about the Chiefs wide receiver situation? Right now we're seeing Sky Moore kind of moving up. Juju's there. The beat reporters are all over MVS right now. So is there a wide receiver value in Kansas City, or is that something you're avoiding?
Kind of like with the running backs, I think they're all going late enough in drafts where you can take shots on them. I mean, Sky Moore is a bit pricier than I'd like. But man, I actually just last week I was doing our Chiefs profiles for the site, so I was really digging into all these wide receivers. And after doing that, I like Sky Moore more than I thought I did before doing those. It's mostly because to me, Juju and MVS have just been underwhelming. I mean, Juju has not really been great for the past 3 years now, and it's been injuries and there's been quarterback issues in Pittsburgh, obviously. But he just hasn't been very efficient or productive over the past few seasons. MVS is interesting. I mean, he never commanded a big target share in Green Bay. He was always more of the situational deep threat guy. I would guess Kansas City thinks he can do more than that based on what they paid him. I think he got a 3-year, $30 million deal. So I think Kansas City thinks he can do more. I mean, we'll see though. He's this is his 5th season now, and again, he never commanded more than like a 15% target share in Green Bay. So I'm not gonna go crazy and think he's gonna all of a sudden be this 22% target share guy in Kansas City. So I guess roundabout way of saying I'm not sure what I think of the situation at this point. But again, they're all going cheap enough where I want to take shots on them because I do think 1 or 2 of these guys is going to hit.
Yeah, sorry, Theo. I was just going to say, and I don't know if you noticed the little taste of another board that we'll be doing a review. You, Dan, and I, and Andrew are doing one of the $35 best ball tournaments on FFPC. And I had Mahomes. I know you don't like his price, Jared, but it's super flex. I don't have any Mahomes, so I took him. And I ended up waiting on who I like actually pairing like a Hardman, who's like in the 14th round, with Sky Moore, who's, a little earlier. I got him in the 10th round. I just feel like you're getting maybe like early season, later season type of compliment, or maybe on and off, week with them. Maybe together they create a good wide receiver 3-ish, just because, or even maybe a wide receiver 2 if things go really well. And I think it's worth taking those shots like you talk about and mixing it up just because of the offense we're talking about and those targets that are now available in that offense with Hill leaving Kansas City.
Yeah, Hardman's interesting. I'm sorry, go ahead about Hardman.
I was just say Hardman's a guy I'm kind of out on. I just think he is what he is at this point. I think he's
Jared, he's gonna pop now that you said you know how it works with these guys, right? He's like the Devante Adams that pops in KC.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. You look at Hardman's had like 9 or 10 career games without Tyreek Hill, and even in those games, he hasn't been very good. I think in like 1 or 2 of them, he's put up useful fantasy numbers. So I just think he's going to kind of stay in the same role he's been in, and that's it's been fine for best ball. He's popped a few weeks every year, but Hardman has not been a guy you can rely on in a lineup setting fantasy league.
He's a role player in my opinion. Yeah. You've seen enough of him in the NFL to know what he is, but MVS is interesting because like he's going super late still, where I don't know. It's sometimes you have to listen to the drum beats and they're all over it. What about the Green Bay wide receiver situation? Christian Watson, Allen Lazard. Some people are even talking about Sammy Watkins. It's really Amari Rodgers. It's an ugly situation. Is there a guy that you think is a value there?
Not really. I mean, I'm not aggressively taking any of those guys. Again, I talked about Green Bay before. They were a slow-paced offense last season. They were like middle of the pack in terms of pass rate. I think they shift even more towards the run now without Devante Adams there. So I'm kind of off the Green Bay passing game in general. I guess, Allen Lazard's a guy I'll take some shots on. I do think he's the best bet to lead those wide receivers in targets, but I mean, I don't want to switch gears, but I think Aaron Jones is the guy who might benefit the most from Devante Adams being gone. We've seen previously in games Adams has missed that Aaron Jones has just taken on a much, much bigger role in the passing game.
Aaron Jones is the correct answer. You're the winner, Jared, because that's the pass catcher you want in Green Bay, in my opinion.
Agreed.
The room agrees.
We're getting pretty deep into the show here in terms of time, so I want to get in. We've asked every single JD. I think we've asked every single guest this question. So we're going to continue with Jared. It's kind of we had a running dynasty rookie draft question. We kept it going with all these guests, so we'll do it for the redraft guys as well. Right now, Jamar Chase, Cooper Kupp, and Justin Jefferson are the consensus top 3 wide receivers. I think most people would bet on one of those 3 being wide receiver 1 overall. If it's not one of those 3, which wide receiver do you think finishes as wide receiver 1 overall this year in fantasy scoring?
Yeah, I thought about this, and I wish I could give him like a crazier answer, more of a hot take, but I do think it's Steph Diggs. When you just look at the Bills' offense in general, how fast-paced and pass-heavy they are, and I expect that to continue this season. So I just think the volume upside is there for Diggs. And then, they lost Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders, and I like Gabe Davis and I like Jamison Crowder, but Crowder's getting up there in age. He's had trouble staying healthy. Davis is unproven as a full-time player. So what if those guys struggle? Then you can get Diggs, up into the 30% target range on a pass-heavy, fast-paced offense. There's a chance he could, start to creep up towards 200 targets. And in that case, that's the scenario where he could definitely finish as the wide receiver 1.
We've had a bunch of guests on that Diggs train. JD, I know you're high on him as well.
Well, I mean, guys, he finished wide receiver 9 last year in a down year. You know what I mean? And this offense is coming back with a vengeance. He's going to be a big part of that. Every year it's basics, but you got to think, you got to give a bit of juice for just Diggs and Allen building that rapport one other season together. This is a long-term thing for them. And until they raise that Super Bowl, I think that investing in both of those guys is just a smart move, especially at Diggs' little minute discount right now.
And they paid the hell out of him. He got a huge contract, and he's like Jared brought up with Devante Adams, like, when you're in that tricky, 9, 10, 11, 12 hole, Diggs is, I think, a great way to structure your team. We've heard a lot the last couple of days. Handcuffing has been a big thing on fantasy Twitter. I think somebody tweeted that you should have Alexander Madison on your Dalvin Cook teams, and it set off like a big June, like we have nothing to talk about argument. Are you a handcuffer? Do you do it sometimes, or is it something you try to avoid?
I mean, it definitely depends on the format for starters. Like if it's just a single 12-team home league, then I think it could definitely make sense. The bigger and bigger you get as far as tournament goes, if you're talking the underdog Best Ball Mania 3 with however many hundreds of thousands of teams are in that, I think it makes less sense. I think to me it also matters how big an investment you made in that starting running back. Like the Dalvin Cook, Alexander Madison situation, if I'm spending a first or second round pick on Dalvin Cook, like I need him to deliver. So I'm probably not handcuffing Madison with Cook. Again, if we're talking about these big tournaments. But if I'm drafting, the top back in round 8 and I get his, quote unquote handcuff in round 12, I think that can work, because in that case you're not making as big of a bet on that starter.
Well, you're usually trying to fill like an RB3, RB4 spot with two guys at that point. So if they're on the same team and you see like that nice compliment, in both of their,
I think a perfect example is the Chiefs backfield. Edwards-Helaire is going in like round 7, and Ronald Jones is around 9 or 10 pick. I mean,
True.
I think that can work where that.
And they'll probably go down now a bit more, right? So
right. Yep.
Yeah. We've talked about I had a rule I try to follow when I use early draft capital on a running back. I try to have a 10-round rule where, like Jared brought up, the Madison maybe being a little too high for that. Where if you draft a guy in the first or second round, and you can get his handcuff 10 rounds later, I have no problem with that.
Yep.
I think you see structural problems where some people would. I mean, for a while it was like you'd always see a drafter trying to get the Chubb and Hunt, or the Pollard and Zeke, where using that too much draft capital and kind of ruins your build.
Yeah,
for sure.
I was showing Theo that I wanted to mention it if you didn't, that I like that rule because I'm not a handcuff guy. I went from years ago being a handcuff guy to just seeing how I just found it just caps your upside on your roster, like you said, Jared, especially in the big tournament leagues. I use the 10-round thing if it's like I'm deciding between two guys and it's, let's say, 13 rounds later, 12 rounds later, as an option. Whereas now I'm like, I'll consider it as an option to mix things up because I'm doing higher volumes. So I do like that just to add some variety to my build, but I'm not usually a handcuff guy.
And I'll say that we've had some of the very best players in the country come on the show. We drafted against some of these guys. I would say that for the super successful high stakes players don't have some steadfast rule. They're not usually you don't find guys in absolutes that are making a ton of money in this game. Guys are flexible and they're willing to do it sometimes. I think that a friend of the show, Bebag Agbatoba, when he was on the show, he said he'll handcuff when he loves his build. So if he has a chance to handcuff towards the end of the draft when he really loves what he's done in the first half of the draft, he'll do it. We've had a couple other guys say they do it on occasion. So don't let Twitter influence you on this. I think you can be fluid on this one and do it sometimes.
For sure. I mean, that's just great advice in general. Don't be locked into any one set strategy. Let the draft play out. I like what Abib said. It kind of sounds like he uses it as a luxury pick if he feels like he has the opportunity to do that. Like to me, like Alexander Madison in round 9, or wherever he's going, that's too expensive to be a luxury
opportunity
pick.
Cost, man. You can't. Yeah. You're giving up too much there.
Yeah, and you brought up Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson. It's do you want to draft your RB4 who's your handcuff or do you want to draft a guy who could beat his ADP by 5 rounds? So it's interesting. It's definitely an interesting one.
All right, we've taken $120. Jared's been super generous, and as we do in the district, we've squeezed as much as we could. You guys in the chat have been awesome. One of our busiest nights in the chat, so we appreciate you guys. Kev Wheeler, Jason Short, 1912, always hanging with us. Our boy Joey Brown, guys. Don't forget the listener league. Send your full name, Twitter handle, email us goatdistrict@gmail.com. Check out Jared Smola at Smola, SMOLADS on Twitter. No brainer follow. You guys probably already know him from Draft Sharks. Guys, make sure you're part of that site. You're following them, and just that extra edge, right? We're always bringing guys that are going to give you that edge. Jared, anything else you want to share with the district before you part us tonight?
No, yeah, just check out my work on draftsharks.com. We are wrapping up our player profiles, which are, super detailed season previews for like 250 players. Basically, every draftable player we have a profile for. Those will be done by the end of this week. They are for our members, but we're posting some of them for free. If you want to just kind of check out what the profiles are all about, you can head over to the site and check those out. Our projections and rankings have been up for months now. They're updated every day as needed. Our Chiefs running back projections are already updated for today's Jerick McKinnon news. So those are always available too.
Awesome.
Theo, always with the VIPs lined up when it comes to our guest list. That's how we do it, man. We want to bring the best. We want you to be the best in your league. Tell the folks who's coming up on the district.
So we have Jack Miller from Establish the Run coming on Thursday. So we talked a ton of redraft tonight with Jared. We'll be talking a lot of best ball and also some redraft with Jack. Jack Miller is super sharp. It's going to be a very, very fun show. And then Monday, we have Dave Hubbard, one of the most successful high-stakes players in the country, and Billy Muzio, also extremely successful high-stakes player, coming on for a double show on Monday. So we've got some great stuff in the GOAT District.
Guys, smash the like, smash the subscribe just to support us. That's all we ask. We keep giving you the goodness, whether it's the guests, the review boards, the live drafts, we answer your questions in the chat. We're trying to help you guys win your leagues in whatever leagues you're playing. Hopefully you're playing on the FFPC. If you're not on the site, sign up now. We'll hook you up with a free sign up bonus if you tag one of us on Twitter. And Underdog, guys, use the code district. You could play for $2 million, guys. You could play for $1 million on FFPC. These are no-brainer sites. If you're listening to this right now in middle of June, no-brainer to play on those sites. And as you know, Viridian Global to get all your GOAT gear. Guys, go check out Jared at Smola DS. He's Theo, the OG Fantasy. Always love hanging with you, brother. I'm at JD GOAT District, and we'll check you all later.
GOAT District, the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text. That trash offer's the best. You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
Jared, that was awesome, dude. Appreciate you sitting through the outro too. I was just putting in the chat. I wish you could play the outro and then like talk to your guests because I feel bad. They're like waiting.
No, it's a sweet song. I wanted to listen to it again anyway, so that was good.
Appreciate.
Have you heard our Ballin' song?
No, I haven't.
That one's good. Well, you know what? Maybe
So
when Adam comes on, we'll just play the ball
Okay.
song so you can hear that one.
Or
So
we
that-
get
so
Jared
that-
back to do a live best ball. We'll do a best ball draft.
So Ballin is the show you guys do like live
Best ball.
drafts and draft reviews. Okay.
Best ball. Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
best
I'd
ball.
love to hop
We,
on.
we try to make it a live draft, but sometimes we
Yep.
have guys come on talk strategy and stuff. But
Sure.
we'd love to have you come on do a live draft, whether it's underdog or FFPC.
Sure.
Awesome, man.
Nice.
Awesome.
All right, boys. Thanks. Appreciate it. That was
Hey,
good.
Appreciate you,
have a
man.
good night, Jared. Take care.
Hey,
You
Jared.
too. See you guys.